This video is for commentary and analysis under fair use. The views expressed are my own, based on publicly available information and my interpretation of it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Motive and Method. My name is Stina, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we get started, please take a moment to like this video. And if you enjoy thoughtful true crime analysis focused on language, framing, contradictions, and behavior, please consider subscribing. I also want to thank my channel members for supporting Motive and Method. Your support helps me continue doing this research and bringing these deeper discussions to the channel. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can click the join button below the video to see the different membership options. Tonight, we are going to examine an interview with Steve Shirilla, Mackenzie Shirilla's father. The interview appears on the True Crime This Week channel hosted by James Renner. I'll include a direct link to the full original interview in the description so that you can watch it in its entirety and form your own conclusions. During this video, I'll be playing selected portions of that interview and pausing frequently to analyze Steve's specific statement, the language he uses, the arguments he appears to be making, and whether those arguments actually help Mackenzie or whether some of them may create even more difficult questions. This is not going to be a reaction to every single sentence of this video, thank God. I've organized a discussion around several larger themes, including Steve's expectations about how the documentary would portray the family, his interpretation of the black box evidence, and his claims involving Dominic, marijuana, and firearms. As always, I'm not a psychologist or an attorney. I hold a BA in communication and have at least 25 years of experience in verbal communication and professional writing. My focus here is on language, framing, internal consistency, and the pattern that emerges when someone explains or defends a particular position. All right, let's begin with Steve Shirilla's description of what he believed the filmmakers had promised and what he later acknowledges may only have been his impression.
What is it like to be a part of the biggest documentary on Netflix?
It's mixed. I was hoping during this process we would get Mackenzie's story out, or what happened to Mackenzie, and not necessarily what everybody's heard or what everybody keeps gleaming off of misinformation. And I want to say it was promised that would be fair, but that's what my allusion to what was going on.
To notice when he said he wants to say that they were promised this, that they would be fair to the family. And in my opinion, fair means telling their side and telling their narrative of what actually happened. But then he backtracks and says it was his illusion. Notice how he says illusion instead of misunderstanding. It's illusion. Those words matter as well.
And she picked that road and blah, 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 what the judge said. But I think after it started talking to us, I think we opened their eyes to, well, maybe there's something funny going on here. And that's where I thought it was. And then when it came out, a lot of the stuff we talked about just wasn't there. There wasn't a lot about the fact that there's no evidence of premeditation, prior calculation or intent. It's not there. And every troll online can tell me, oh yeah, she did it, all this, oh, she was speeding down that road and she didn't hit her brakes. Well, she didn't hit her brakes for 4.74 seconds.
Okay, I'll stop right here. It can be argued by many of us, including the courts, that there was evidence. It was circumstantial. And most times during a conviction, most evidence is actually circumstantial, but you put all those circumstantial situations or evidence together and it gives you a story. And it can be argued, and I argue it here too, there's evidence. Steve here goes into the black box recording, goes on and on about that. He's been saying that since the conviction, since the trial. 4.74 seconds. The black box came on, recorded that she didn't brake. He says she didn't brake for 4.74 seconds. Well, that's the last 4.74 seconds before the crash. And she was well on her way to the crash at that time. You also have to realize that when a vehicle's traveling at something like 100 miles per hour, 4.74 seconds covers a lot of distance. And Steve doesn't seem to want to even talk about that or acknowledge that. He just keeps on with the same story over and over again. We'll continue here.
Of that ride. That's the only information they have. 4 points. That's when the black box turned on about 5 or 6 seconds before she crossed Almeda Road and before it went into the building. Something happened in that car that caused that black box to turn on, which was, I think the car from our car expert that we talked to said that the car thought it was flipping over. So the black box turned on and started recording the car information in a non-linear sort of way.
That turning on like that is, in my opinion, the time that the steering wheel was jerked, which was probably Dom or Davion trying to save their lives and keep from hitting that building. Then the black box came on. And then the airbags apparently deployed. He's going to talk about that, the side airbags.
And that's important, that non-linear sort of way. And it deployed both side airbags. And I'm sorry, side airbags don't just go pillow fight. You know, it's not a soft explosion. It's a boom. And then there's powder all over there's powder floating in the car, in the cabin of the car.
Are you saying the airbags deployed before the accident? There'd be
Both side airbags deployed prior to her car crossing the street to hit the sign to get veered into the building.
My opinion here is it didn't matter that the airbags deployed. I think he said prior to her hitting that sign and then going right into the building. That doesn't matter because she was already in motion. Her vehicle was already in motion going at an extreme rate of speed. She was headed that way. She was aimed toward the corner, which she eventually hit. And so the airbags going off had nothing, in my opinion, nothing to do with the crash at all, except it maybe disoriented them for a moment. But other than that, that was where she was headed anyway before the airbags went off, with no braking or anything in that time period. So let's continue.
They got the black box information. The black box is a nonlinear function. It's like an airplane black box, but it doesn't record sound and what's going on in the cabin. It records mechanical aspects of the car, braking, accelerating, blah, blah, that kind of stuff. So the only actual evidence, hard, knock on wood, evidence is from 4.74 seconds of that black box.
Yeah.
That's not talking what happened prior to all the way to when she turned. That's another what?
But all that happened prior when she turned onto that industrial parkway road, I can't remember the name of the road offhand. She was driving calmly. She turned calmly. She used her turn signals to turn onto that road. And then we have cameras, as we've all seen, that shows her 100 miles an hour, approximately, driving down this road. This also curvy. It's dangerous driving on that road at that kind of speed also. But it just shows that she knew what she was doing, in my opinion. She could maneuver that vehicle, and she did. So again, this argument he makes doesn't hold any weight at all.
Thing we saw in that video of her speeding at the
that last moment.
Yeah.
That's after the black box turned on
and after the airbags deployed.
Mhm.
So
And
it could just be 3 kids in the car freaking out because
Sasquatch could have popped in the car. Anything.
I mean, it would be hard to drive.
Yeah. Well, the car expert said, he said nobody anybody in that car would be disoriented because of.
Well, I've got to say, in the last 4.74 seconds, whether they were disoriented or not didn't matter because they were already going that speed. And if they were 3 young people freaking out in the car, I'm sure they were, at least the guys, trying to stop her. But that didn't have anything to do with the crash, in my opinion. I'm not a crash car reconstructionist or anything like that, but it just makes sense to me.
The 2 explosions and the powder floating around, you wouldn't be able to see. So now I can't explain the speed. I can't explain the speed, but
Finally, Steve says, I can't explain the speed. So he has to admit that, because how do you explain the speed, Steve? I'm sorry, I don't mean to get rude about this, but what do you guys think? You know, it's like, yes, because she had the pedal to the metal. I mean, she didn't relent on that gas pedal. It was down to the floorboard. So this doesn't make any sense what he's trying to prove here.
That road is a cut through in Strongsville, and the police know it. Everybody uses it. I've been down that road at a pretty good clip at times. Not saying it's right. I'm not saying, okay, not at all. It's a shortcut for work.
Oh, so I get it. So Steve is trying to say here that her going that speed, it's a cut through. Not that it's okay, Steve says, but it's a cut through. That's what Steve is trying to say. That's how he's trying to account for the speed. But 100 miles an hour approximately, get real.
And plus, Dom did not like going down Pro Road. He liked
Now, this point of the video is where, in my opinion, Steve starts slanting this interview toward blaming Dom. So suddenly, and you guys tell me in the comments what you think as this goes on, he switches to Dom and he's blaming Dom. And suddenly, Mackenzie is the victim and Dom was the leader. And Dom is the reason why all of this happened. He doesn't come out and say it, but that is what it sounds like to me. But what do you guys think?
Why didn't he like going down Pearl Road?
He sold drugs, or at least my understanding is he sold marijuana at this time. And if he got pulled over and he had marijuana on him, he would go to jail.
There's lots of police.
And there's a lot of police, and they sit in the shops all the way up Pearl. And
Okay, so Dom, he says a little bit in a second here that he made Mackenzie drive down that road because he didn't like to drive down Pearl because of all the police officers sitting there in the shops. So Dom is responsible for them going down the industrial parkway. And Mackenzie was driving fast, I guess he's saying, because people do. He's driven at a pretty good clip through there himself. It just gets worse. Like I said, he's making himself and Mackenzie look worse than they do.
it's a quick cut through, and he always made her go down through that way. Even on her prom, her mom, Christine Russo and Dom made her go down that road. And so Dom would have Mackenzie hold the drugs.
How do you know that? How do you know Dom was into that?
Because my daughter told me. He told me that he sells marijuana and friends buy it from him.
Okay, notice how sheepish, in my opinion, that Steve looked like he really didn't want to say that because my daughter told me. Well, I look pretty sheepish myself because that means, if this is true, that means Steve knew for a long time that Dom apparently was a dealer, not only a user, marijuana, but a dealer. And he sell it, of course. But of course, he's not making Mackenzie any part of that. It's Dom. Again, he's shifting the blame here. And his daughter is the angel, but it's Dom's fault.
I know a lot of, I know, it's just something that I know.
So
After 4 years.
His background.
That's the reason why he would have Mercury mule for him, carry his drugs. So if they got pulled over, she got in trouble for him, but it would be just a slap on the wrist, basically.
Right here, it's true. Steve is admitting that Mackenzie knew that she would get a lesser sentence being a minor than an adult would get. So is it too far of a stretch to believe that there was a method to her madness of crashing the car like a couple of days before she turned 18? Possibly. Steve appears to offer this story about being a drug mule for Dom to make Dom look exploitative and Mackenzie look victimized. But if Steve truly believed his 17-year-old daughter was being used as a drug mule, why did he not remove her from that relationship or intervene much more forcefully? And then he cannot simultaneously present this as an alarming exploitation of his minor daughter and describe his response as simply teaching her to be careful, which he does a little bit later on. Steve later confirms he knew about the marijuana, talks about picking his battles and things like that, and that he did not see marijuana as especially dangerous, and he believed Mackenzie was mature enough to handle it. That's the part I'm not going to play because I don't think we need to. She was mature enough to handle it. He picked his battles. We can see him using the same phrases in his various interviews too. At some point, he warned Mackenzie not to drive with it and to be careful with Dom. Oh, that's great. You just warned your teenage daughter to be careful and not drive with it and be careful with Dom. Wasn't that his responsibility as a father, as a parent, to get her out of that? She could have fought him, but that's kind of my point. I don't think they fought her on anything. And he says she needs to learn from her own experience, all that. The other part is, if your daughter is being exploited by an older boy that she's been with for 4 years, then pick your battles is not a convincing parental response, in my opinion. Also, let me ask you guys this, and we come upon this again a little later. What do you think, guys? Based on everything we know about Mackenzie, based on her jail calls and her recordings and her text messages with Dom, does Mackenzie appear to be someone who could simply be ordered around, told which road to take, told to carry drugs, and made to accept all the risk? Or does the evidence suggest she had considerable agency of her own? That does not make Dom innocent or harmless. Both of them may have engaged in reckless or illegal behavior, but Dom's misconduct does not automatically transform Mackenzie into his passive victim. Listen to this, guys.
She was 17. She's a dumb kid. She wasn't breaking up. She didn't do it on purpose. And I've asked her, did you do this on purpose? And she's going, no. And I would think if my daughter was that mad at that boy to want to kill him that way, Davion would have never been in the car.
Right.
Okay, 2 things. Right here, he's saying that Mackenzie was a dumb kid. But earlier, he talks about her being able to make her own decisions, being mature enough, all this to make her own decisions. But suddenly, she's a dumb kid. And I also disagree with his explanation that if she was planning to take the life of Dom, the Davion wouldn't be in the car. I disagree because there's a lot of reasons. She could have flipped out, seen red, went into an instant rage, and at that point didn't care who all was in the car. So,
that makes no sense. If she was going to do that to Dom, there were guns all over that kid's house. Okay.
Where'd the guns come from?
He bought them. I don't know. The reason I know he has guns because something was going on over there, and he took all the guns and threw them.
Now listen to this other part of this.
In my daughter's trunk, and I went into my daughter's trunk to get something, and in the trunk there was 10, 15 guns. Half of them were loaded. I had to.
Oh my God.
So that's how I know he has guns. If she was going to kill him, that would make more sense to me. But
and you don't involve an innocent.
So that makes no sense there.
Steve, it doesn't make sense, in my opinion, what you are saying. Okay, let's think about this, guys, for a second. You're a father, and you open up your daughter's trunk, and there's, he says, 10 or 15 firearms in the trunk, and I believe he said they're loaded and everything like that. And that something happened in the neighborhood, I think he said, that Mackenzie had told him that. He put those guns in her trunk. What would a typical father, or mother for that matter, reaction be if your minor daughter is living in a situation where he's not only a drug dealer, according to what Steve is saying, but he has a house full of guns to probably defend himself because he's doing something dangerous, allegedly. And that's all alleged. It makes no sense. This just makes Steve look even worse, if it's possible, than he has been looking. by trying to make Dom look bad, he's making himself look really worse. And Mackenzie as well, because no matter how Steve, in my opinion, no matter how Steve is trying to play this off, that Mackenzie's this innocent victim, she was not. She was an active participant, as we've seen, and probably the ringleader of most of it, pushing Dom into these things, in my opinion. Steve thinks he's making his Dom look bad, but Steve has just told us that his 17-year-old daughter's vehicle allegedly contained these 10, 15 firearms, some loaded. Then the obvious question is, what did Steve do when he discovered them? Did he remove Mackenzie from that environment? It certainly doesn't sound like it. And did he contact Dom's parents or law enforcement? Did he restrict her access to the car? If this situation was as dangerous as he now describes it, why was his minor daughter allowed to remain deeply embedded in it? And of course, she was just the innocent little person in this. And so that, along with the marijuana claims, makes Steve look much worse. And Mackenzie does not emerge looking innocent either. Her car was allegedly being used to transport guns. She was allegedly carrying marijuana. She was openly using marijuana herself, as everybody saw on her social media. The picture Steve creates is not of an uninvolved child who accidentally wandered into Dominic's world. It is of a teenager actively participating in a shared pattern of risky behavior. So, after listening to Steve Shirilla's interview, I keep coming back to one central problem. The more Steve tries to reduce Mackenzie's responsibility by emphasizing Dom's behavior, the more complicated his own account becomes. He describes Mackenzie as someone Dom directed, influenced, and used. Someone who was told which road to take, allegedly asked to carry marijuana, and exposed to an environment involving numerous firearms. But elsewhere, Steve describes Mackenzie as mature, independent, capable of making her own choices, and someone who needed to learn through experience. Those two versions do not fit comfortably together. Was Mackenzie a passive teenager who was easily controlled by Dom? Or was she mature enough to manage marijuana, make her own decisions, and accept the consequences of those decisions? Steve appears to move between those two portrayals depending on which one best supports the argument he is making at that particular moment. And none of this requires us to pretend that Dom was innocent, responsible, or harmless. Dom may very well have participated in illegal, dangerous, and reckless behavior, but evidence of Dom's misconduct does not automatically erase Mackenzie's agency. Responsibility is not a fixed amount that must be divided between two people. Dom can bear responsibility for his own choices, while Mackenzie remains responsible for hers. And perhaps the most troubling part of Steve's account is that the darker he makes this environment sound, the more questions he raises about the adults around Mackenzie. If Steve genuinely believed his minor daughter was being used to transport drugs, surrounded by loaded guns, and controlled by a dangerous boyfriend, why was the response apparently limited to warnings about being careful and allowing her to learn through experience? That does not make Steve responsible for what ultimately happened, but it does make his current framing much less persuasive, in my opinion. He appears to believe that every damaging detail about Dom strengthens Mackenzie's defense. In reality, though, some of those details may make Mackenzie look more involved in a shared pattern of dangerous behavior, and may make Steve look less attentive to the risks he now says were obvious. So, it's your turn. I want to know what you guys think. Do you believe Steve's interview makes Mackenzie appear more like Dom's victim? Or does it raise even more questions about her own agency? Do you think Steve's descriptions of Mackenzie are internally consistent? And what did you make of marijuana and gun claims? Did those details help his argument, or did they make the situation sound even worse? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this analysis thoughtful or valuable, please like the video and consider subscribing to Motive and Method. I'll see you in the next one.